Blog Talk Radio.
And in those days there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on Earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars, and imagine there's got to be planets like ours. Some conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we lost. That indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall in the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past. Time elapses and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that God came in alien craft. They react in this way, they're so desperate for meaning and purpose, but satanic service. They know that they have evil motives. Am I making you nervous? I'm just scratching the surface. The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. In the blink of an eye, all believers will be raptured. Anyone left receives a mark or they're captured. This leader will arise, claim his origins are alien, possessed by Satan on the side of the Nephilim. Profess those who left held us back from evolving, and now that they're gone, we'll solve all of Earth's problems. The worship of any one God will be halted. Evolve into gods and ourselves be exalted. They'll play on these lines, and in time they'll devise and arrive at a plan that will help hypnotize all the ones left behind, the spiritually blind. He's stolen their souls, now he's stealing their minds. It's already started, we're seeing the signs. Just study the word, prophecies all aligned. Now chop off the heads of all those who fight at one earth, one world. Aren't you excited? The signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. Where will you be in the year 2012? Are they casting a spell they're not ready to tell? It's time to reveal what they tried to keep veiled. Pure evil they hail and they sell it so well. He fell from the heavenly realms where he dwelled, a once beautiful angel that tried to rebel. Expelled from the light into darkness and hell, now a serpent and snake with reptilian scale. He wears a disguise with angelic wings and mimics the truth with a lie so obscene. He always repeats the same thing he told Eve, that you'll be supreme, a king or a queen, that you can evolve to an enlightened being, a god of your own that can do anything. He sees on our souls with this fraudulent scheme in so many ways, but it's all just the same. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near. See the signs from Ezekiel's wheel, when the skies unfold like scrolls and the breaking of seals. Heed the warning, the message is clear. Heed the warning, the time draws near.
Why hide yourself with, creating UFO crafts and things like that? Why that deception if that's indeed what's going on?
The creatures figured out that there was one way that they could frighten mankind, and that is to present themselves as technologically superior beings from physical UFOs.
Why would they want to abduct human beings?
UFO abduction might not be caused by physical occupants, but from creatures living in perhaps what we would call another dimension.
Posing as occupants.
Yes, the same type of interfering, harassing, paraphysical creature in every culture worldwide.
For I knew you would sin and transgress and come out into this land. Yet I wouldn't force you, nor be heard over you, nor shut up, nor doom you through your fall, nor through your coming out from light into darkness, nor yet through your coming from the garden into this land. For I made you of the light, and I willed to bring out children of light from you, and light unto you. But you did not keep my commandment one day until I had finished the creation and blessed everything in it. And then, concerning the tree, I commanded you not to eat of it, yet I knew that Satan, who deceived himself, would also deceive you. So I made known to you by means of the tree not to come near him. And I told you not to eat of the fruit thereof, nor to taste of it, nor yet to sit under it, nor to yield to it. Had I not been outspoken to you, O Adam, concerning the tree, and had I left you without a commandment, and you had sinned, it would have been an offense on my part, for not having given you any order. You would turn around and blame me for it. But I commanded you and warned you, and you fell, so that my creatures cannot blame me, but the blame rests on them alone. The first book of Adam and Eve, chapter 13, verse 13 through 19. Welcome, friends. I'm your host, Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv. I appreciate you joining us for a Wednesday evening broadcast. It's 9 p.m. East Coast time, and we're streaming out of Athens, Georgia. And I know that there's a lot of new listeners that have been coming to the show, and so we're going to catch people up a little bit on a follow-up on the trees of paradise, connect the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil to the war between and the enmity between the two seed lines, the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent. We're going to talk about the lineage of Cain and the lineage of Adam through Seth, the line which brought us Yahushua, Savior, Messiah, which brought us a cleansing of the slate and a renewed chance for redemption and eternal life. And so we'll talk about that, but we're also going to talk about the various embodiments of the Nachash. And what is interesting to me is of late, I know of late there have been at least two very well-respected and well-researched individuals that have released papers citing their support of basically the theory that the Nachash of Genesis chapter 3, that this particular being was not a serpent or a snake in the traditional sense of the word, and in that when we think of a snake or a serpent, we think of those creatures that, you know, are upon the earth now that have no arms or legs and that go about on its belly and must swallow its food whole. The Nachash of Genesis chapter 3 is a wholly different type of being. And so it's important for people to look into this, delve into this aspect of the Word and what happened in the garden, because it's important for you to understand the veiled connotations behind the Nachash. Because these particular beings, these Nachash, these reptilian shape-shifting beings, they are with us even today, and they're spoken about throughout the world's oral traditions and mythologies and documented accounts of those who came from the heaven to the earth, the supposed star gods, the ancient ones, the feathered serpent, the Quetzalcoatl, the Kukulkan, the Viracocha of ancient lore. And so we're going to delve into this. But I'm going to start by bringing forth something that, I had mentioned to individuals that have recently brought forth papers. One is Michael Heiser, who wrote about the Nachash and how he thinks, considers it to be an upright, shining one. And for those that have access to the chat room, I'm pasting a link now to a paper that he wrote. It's a PDF that speaks about the Nachash. And I'm not going to read all of it, but, Michael Heiser is one of the world's foremost authorities on the Hebrew language and the interpretation of it, and so he's very well respected. And in his interpretation of what the traditional Torah says. And so this will be interesting. We're not going to cover a lot of it. We'll cover some of it. And then the other individual that also kind of cited and came to the same conclusions as I did on this is Patrick Heron. And he wrote about who is the serpent in the garden. You can find that on his website, raptureready.com. Or you can just type into the search bar, Who is the Serpent of Genesis by Patrick Heron. Okay, touching upon this, and then we'll go into some other aspects of this. But what Michael Heiser says of the translation of the word Nachash, the Hebrew word Nachash, is actually an adjective, he says, meaning bright, brazen, as in shiny brass. With a prefixed article, the word the in Hebrew, thus the word is formed. The whole word in Hebrew text is ha-na-kash. Nakash is pronounced Nakash. What is different about this particular word being adjective from its noun pronunciation? He says, what is different about this approach is that I view the base word Nakash as an adjective, not a noun. The noun spelled Nakash in Hebrew can mean snake, serpent, or one who practices of divination. The adjective means bright, brazen, and is itself the base word for other nouns in Hebrew, like shining brass. Hebrew grammar, it is not unusual for an adjective to be converted for use as noun. Now, I'm going to skip to the part where he's talking about what happens in the garden. He says this: personally, I tend to think that in light of the serpentine appearance of divine beings in Yahweh's presence, what we have in Genesis 3 is wordplay using all the meanings of Nakash in its semantic range. That is, Eve was not talking to a snake. She was speaking to a bright, shining, upright being who was serpentine in appearance and who was trying to bewitch her with lies. Same conclusion that I came to in my book. She was in the presence of one of the sons of God, beings who had free will, who were more powerful than mere angels, whom humanity was created a little lower than, he says. She was speaking to a member of the divine council who did not share Yahweh's enthusiasm for his new creation, humankind, to whom Yahweh had just given rule over the planet. These mere humans were, as the lesser Elohim had been previously, created as Yahweh's image, to rule the cosmos for Yahweh and earth, at least until humanity was fashioned. In this last regard, I share the view of certain lines of Jewish tradition that teach the serpent's motive for seducing Eve was jealousy at humanity's appointment as supreme authority under Yahweh on earth. And so, he says that when Adam was created and given dominion of paradise, which I talk about this in my book as well, that's when he decided to seduce Eve. Now, Michael Heiser doesn't go as far as saying that Eve was impregnated by the Nachash. He's very careful to not go there, and a lot of people are. And I don't understand why, but it is that way. Like, a lot of people will come to this very same conclusion, decide, yes, it was the this reptilian, divine, enchanted being that seduced Eve, but they won't go as far as saying that Cain is actually a child and a consequence of that seduction. He says this about the curse. My talking about the curse on the Nachash. My view of the curse in simple terms is that as the Nachash desired to vaunt himself above all created things on earth and above the apex of that creation, humanity, so God turns the tables on him. He will now be placed under humanity's authority, who also governs the animals. And so that's another reason why there's enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, because the Nachash, they consider themselves to be here first, and they consider this planet to be theirs, and they consider us to be interlopers. And so, because we are the new creation, and that's also one of the reasons why they hate us to such a degree. But I would, recommend people reading the rest of that article by Michael Heiser. It's pretty interesting. And I do agree with him that the Nachash of Genesis chapter 3 was definitely not a snake, was not a serpent. Well, it may have been serpentine in appearance, much like the emerald tablets say of those that are ruling over the kingdoms of man right now. There are other ancient texts that also talk about these particular beings and their presence on this planet, but also in the affairs of humanity. But what a lot of people don't realize is that the Nachash, the feathered serpent, the winged serpent of Genesis chapter 3, that he is the father of Cain. And that Cain was the first hybrid child, was the first unnatural creation. to be born on the planet, and that was the seed line of the serpent. And that's why it speaks of in Genesis chapter 3:15 the enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. How can you have enmity between these two different seeds and these two different bloodlines if there is only one family of being, one family of creature here on this planet? You can't. It doesn't make sense. The only way that you can explain those passages and come to discernment on what Yahushua was speaking about when he accuses them of being of Abraham's seed, but being of their father, the devil. That even the parable of the wheat and the tares in Matthew chapter 13, and also the parable of the garden, and about the one that snuck in and sowed his seed at night. All those things are tied to this knowledge, this connection of the Nachash to Genesis chapter 3. Now, I have to make something very clear here as well, because I'm attacked a lot on this particular issue, on this particular teaching. But what people don't understand is what I teach as far as the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That first fruit that they ate of in paradise, that Satan tricked them into eating. That fruit was a spiritual fruit and resulted in their having to incarnate into the flesh. And it resulted in them losing what was called their light vestures, their immortal bright nature, their angelic being, their first estate. And so that fruit had nothing to do initially with sex or the act of it. The prophecies of Genesis chapter 3, which are concerned with things that will occur to Adam and Eve once they are transformed into the flesh, does not happen and does not take place until the 8th day, until their transformation into flesh and their banishment to the garden, to the cave of treasures, to the earth, where the fallen ones are already banished to. So it wasn't until their placement here on this planet and them assuming flesh embodiments that Eve was actually raped by the archons and then impregnated with the firstborn son of the devil, Cain. That all occurred here on the earth. And I explain all this in my book, in the next book coming up. I explain it somewhat in my 4th book, Lucifer, Father of Cain. But in this book, Sons of God, I explain in detail the different Adams, the 3 creations of Adam. They're linked to the 3 world ages, the differences between the 6th day Adam of paradise and the 8th day Adam of dust, because they are 2 different days, 2 different events, and there's 2 different sets of scripture which discuss both events. The Nag Hammadi Codices have to do with the eighth day creation of dust Adam, and Genesis in the Old Testament has to do with the sixth day fall from paradise of Adam and Eve and the loss of their immortal bright nature. Two different events, two different stories, two different days. It's important for you to understand that distinction, or you will be like one of those Gnostic experts on YouTube trying to merge these two stories together when they're completely separate events. All right. Now I'm going to read something else here. About the forbidden fruit. I'm going to read a story that not a lot of people have heard. And this is a interesting story, and it'll give you some insight on the fall from a whole different perspective, but interesting nonetheless. All right, I'm going to tell you the story of Maeva and Dedam from the Colbrin Bible. And I know a lot of people have not read the Colbrin Bible or even have heard of it. It's a text that has only been recently available to us since 2006, and it is very, very thick. It supposedly is a document that was kept in the possession of certain families there in England, certain priests that were involved with different churches and different abbeys, and that this one family was entrusted to care for and to protect what has come to be known to us as the Colbrin text, and that these particular scriptures were handed down and written and go all the way back several thousand years, but give an account of early and ancient history from the viewpoint of the Celtic priesthood and also the Celtic Druidic priesthood, as well as the ancient Egyptian priesthoods. And it's an interesting text, but you have to know that it's written from, the pagan perspective. But anyways, so I'm going to read you this story, and then we'll discuss it afterwards. I'll have to explain a little bit about it as we go. It says this: about the land of the children of God was the wasteland where Yoslings called the children of Zumat, which means they who inherit death dwelt. Amongst these, Namtenagal, the wily hunter, was the most wise and cunning. He alone was unafraid of the children of God, and he alone dared enter the garden land. In the days when Astartha, or who we know as Astarte, or Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, Astarte was teaching, Namtenagal often came to hear her words, and the children of God were not displeased, for teaching the wild men about them was a duty with which they had been charged. Namtenagal therefore participated in their rites, but could not partake of the elixir from which the Gwenduvia, because this was forbidden. While it gave health and strength to the children of God, safeguarding them from the sickness of the Yoslings, if given to others, it caused a wasting away. It was also altogether forbidden for any of the children of God to mate with the Yoslings. for this was deemed to be the most unforgivable of sins. Now the wily one learned much from Astarte, and in the fullness of time brought his own son to her, and he became as her son, living in her house and forsaking the ways of his people. Astarte called him Luid, the Lightbringer, for it was her intention that he should be taught the ways of those who walked in light, that he might in time enlighten his own people. I got to stop here for just a second. According to this text, this Colbrin text, Astarte, or who we know as Isis, Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, is teaching to these particular Yoslings and also these children of God, or so-called children of God. Now, this Luid, the Lightbringer, in this story, he is parallel to Lucifer, the Lightbringer. And so in the next part of the story, you're going to see how Maeva and Luid begin a courting, so to speak. Says this: Luid grew up tall and handsome. He was quick to learn and became wise. He was also a man of the chase, strong and enduring, a hunter of renown. But there were times when the call of his people was strong, and then he would go out furtively into the night to indulge in their dark rituals. Thus he became knowledgeable in the ways of the flesh and in the carnal indulgences of the body. Dedam became a servant of the sacred enclosure where the misty veil between the realms could be penetrated, for all those having the blood of Arua had twin sight and an ability to see Ras and Sithfolk, Ansis and spirit beings, all the things of the other world, not clearly, but as through a veil. Beside the place called Gizar was a pleasant parkland with trees of every kind, and a stream, also thickets of flowing bushes, and all manner of plants growing lushly. It was the custom of Maeva to wander there in the sunshine. And Luid also went there, and so it came about that they met among the trees. Maeva knew the man, but had shunned him in the past. Now she saw that he was handsome, possessed of many attractions, and so her foot was stayed, and she did not run away. As the days passed, they dallied longer together, and Luid talked of things Maeva had not heard before. She felt a stirring in her blood, but did not respond or heed his temptations, because of the things which were forbidden. And so Luid went to the Moon Mother, wise women of the Yoslings, and telling of his desires, beseeched her to help him. The Moon Mother gave him 2 apples containing a vile substance which they had drawn through their stalks. This Luid gave to Maeva, who then became helpless in his hands. They met again, and after this, for Maeva became enamored towards Luid, but it happened that she became ill with a strange sickness and was afraid. And then Dedam became ill, and Luid also. And Luid said to the woman, "You must obtain the pure essences from within the sacred enclosure." And Setina, the Moon Mother, will prepare an elixir which will cure us. This he said because none of his kind had ever been able to obtain the sacred substances, though they had always coveted what had been denied them. And now, because of her frailty, the woman was pliable in his hands, and Lewis seized the opportunity to achieve his ends. Lewis gave Maeva a portion which he had been prepared by the Moon Mother, and she administered this to Dadam and those with him by guile and deceit, so that they fell asleep. And while they slept, Maeva stole from the sacred substances, took them to Lewis, who gave them to the Moon Mother. She made a brew. Part of this was given to Maeva, and the rest was drunk by the Yoslings. From their awful ankital during their night rites, when the morning came, they were all smitten with grievous pains. And before the sun set that day, all the Yoslings were stricken with a sickness they had not known before. Maeva took what had been given to her, and finding Dadam laid low in his bed, gave him a draught from her vessel. Though she had to use womanly wiles to get him to drink, she drank the remainder, and they both slept. But when they awoke in the morning, both were suffering pains, as this was something they had not known before. Dadam said to the woman, "What have you done? For what has happened to us cannot be unless the things which are forbidden have been done." The woman replied, "Lord, I was tempted and I fell. I have done that which is forbidden and unforgivable." Dadam said, "I am bound by duty to do certain things, but first let us go into Gezer to the place called Beth-Kel-Chris, where I will seek enlightenment." And so they went there together and stood before the shrine beneath the tree of wisdom. There they were filled with an inflowing vision, seeing themselves as they were and as they should have been. They were ashamed. He, because he had not followed the proper path of a man, and she, because of her falsity. There, in the reflecting mist, the contamination of the woman was revealed. The man's heart shriveled within him like a flower licked by flame. And then they saw a great spirit being materializing in the reflecting mist, and he said to them, "Woe to you and your house, for the greatest of evils has befallen the race of the children of God, and it is defiled. The heritage of Kadamampa is lost. The fetid flow defiling the woman results from the incompatible intermingling. But it is not all, for sickness and diseases are also generating from the ferments of the impure implantation." See, here the spirit being is showing to both Maeva and Dadam that she is pregnant with the fetid flow defiling the woman, results from the incompatible intermingling and the impure implantation. Dadam said, "The fault is with the woman, wherefore should I suffer?" And the spirit being replied, "Because you two are now as one. The cankerworms of disease and sickness strike both equally, but you shall not again defile this place. Henceforth the misty veil becomes an impenetrable barrier severing our two realms from each other, so they can no longer be easily spanned. Between us there will now be no means of communication. So in this story, interesting enough, it speaks of Luid, the Lightbringer, as being the one that seduced Maeva into stealing of the sacred essences, and that this sacred essences was made into this concoction that once drank resulted in them passing out and then being seduced and raped by spiritual forces that they could not understand. And that the rape of these spiritual forces resulted in her being pregnant with this impure implantation, or the child Cain. Interesting story. Whether there's any truth behind it or whether there's any kind of inspiration, anything at all, I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just sharing it with you because I find it interesting. All right, now I want to cover, because we're going to talk about in an upcoming show, we're going to talk about Samael, the angel of death. In the Targums, I want to give a shout out to Gray and to Black and to Jazz and to all the other guests in the chat room. But in the text, in the Targums, which are old translations of the original Hebrew Torah, when the people were taken into exile, taken into Babylon, Hebrew was the language of the scholars, the language of the priesthood. It was a language that the Torah and the sacred Gospels were written in. But when the people were taken into captivity, and for that 70 years that they were exiled and assimilated into the Babylonian culture, they forgot how to use the original Hebrew language. And so Targums came into being. And Targum essentially means translation. And these Targums were written directly from the Torah, and they were translated into Aramaic and Palestinian, these two different languages. And these two different language translations were actually read side by side with the Hebrew Torah for the lay people that no longer could understand the Hebrew language. And so studying these old 1st century, 2nd century language translations from the original Hebrew Torah gives interesting introspection into what is being revealed in those ancient texts. And so I'm going to read a little bit from the Targums because I'm going to cover these more in the next show. But just to give you an idea of what they say. It says this. And the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and was afraid. Yet she knew that the tree was good to eat, and that it was medicine for the enlightenment of the eyes, and a desirable tree by means of which to understand. And she took of its fruit, and did eat, and she gave to her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both were enlightened, and they knew that they were naked, divested of the purple robe in which they had been created. And they saw the sight of their shame, and sewed to themselves the leaves of figs, and made to them cinctures. Okay, notice that in this text it doesn't talk about the serpent as being a subtle creature of the field. It says that the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and that he was the serpent, the Nachash, the upright divine one, the enchanter, the one of the divine council, one of the angels supposedly tending the garden, and that he used his authority to deceive Adam and Eve. Continuing, we're going to read a little bit of the Targums up until chapter 5, because they give some interesting insight here. And the Lord God brought the three unto judgment, and he said to the serpent, Because thou hast done this, cursed art thou of all the cattle, and of all the beasts of the field. Upon thy belly thou shalt go, and thy feet shall be cut off. Thy skin thou shalt cast away once in 7 years, and the poison of death shall be in thy mouth. Dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. Here is the interesting part. This is Genesis 3:15 from the Targums. It says this. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between the seed of thy son and the seed of her sons. And it shall be, when the sons of the woman keep the commandments of the law, that they will be prepared to smite thee upon thy head. But when they forsake the commandments of the law, thou wilt be ready to wound them in their heel. Did you notice the subtle variation? I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between the seed of thy son and the seed of her sons. And so here, the Targums are saying that both the serpent and the woman are to have bloodline progeny, that they are going to have sons. And so, for those that say that, Genesis 3:15 is only referencing the later coming of Christ in the flesh, this is talking about a war between bloodlines in many generations and many participants in the war. All right, we're going to read in Genesis 4:1 from the various Targums. And these are interesting for those people that have not heard the Targum translations for Genesis 4:1, which is the passage that most people that, try to discredit the serpent seed theory will cite this particular passage and just leave it at that. They won't look into anything else. They'll just cite this. And so, looking at older language translations, because we know what the 1611 King James Version of the Bible says. This is what the Palestinian Targum says. And Adam knew his wife Eve, who had desired the angel. Desired what angel? According to the text, Samael, the angel of death. So, and Adam knew his wife Eve, who had desired the angel, and she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. Now, the Targum of Onkelos, Genesis chapter 4:1 says this. And Adam knew Hava, his wife, who had desired the angel, and she conceived and bare Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. And she added to bear from her husband Adam his twin, even Abel. Okay, so in the first translation, the Palestinian Targum, you have where Eve is desiring the angel. And after desiring the angel, it's then that she conceives and bear Cain. And that's when she says, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. Now notice in this next one, the Targum Onkelos, in the second aspect of the passage it says, and she added to bear from her husband Adam his twin, even Abel. So there's specific detachment as to Cain being a child of the angel whom Eve desired, and that Abel was from her husband Adam, who she added later. Now this one is one of my most favorite. This one is from the Targum of Jonathan. It says this, and Adam knew his wife Eve, who was pregnant by the angel Samael, and she conceived and bare Cain. And he was like the heavenly beings, and not like the earthly beings. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. Now this particular passage is loaded. Notice Adam knew his wife Eve. The next passage, who was pregnant by the angel Samael. That's the same thing in the other passages where it says, who had desired the angel. And she conceived and bare Cain. So it was after her being pregnant by the angel Samael, and after her desiring the angel, that she conceived, bare Cain. It says here, he was like the heavenly beings, and not like the earthly beings. And she said, I have acquired a man, the angel of the Lord. So in each one of those references, these Targum references, you see the allusion to the angel as being responsible for her conceiving and bearing Cain. Now, I'm going to skip to chapter 5 from the Targums. It says this, and I think this will be the last thing I'll be able to cover. My goodness, we already run out of time. All right, chapter 5 of the Targums says this. This is the book of the genealogy of man. In the day that the Lord created man, in the likeness of the Lord he made him. Male and female he created them, and blessed them in the name of his word, and he called their name man in the day that they were created. And Adam lived 130 years and begat Sheth, who had the likeness of his image and of his similitude. For before had Hava borne Cain, who was not like to him, and Abel was killed by his hand. And Cain was cast out, neither is his seed genealized in the book of the genealogy of Adam. But afterwards there was born one like him, and he called his name Sheth. And the days of Adam after he begat Sheth were 800 years. He begat sons and daughters. Notice, just emphasizing this, and then we're going to end the show. And Adam lived 130 years and begat Sheth, who had the likeness of his image. And of his similitude, yes, Seth was of Adam. And notice this part. For before had Hava borne Cain. So before Adam knew her and before he impregnated her, with Sheth, here Hava had borne Cain, who was not like him. So not like Adam. And Abel was killed by his hand. And Cain was cast out. Neither is his seed genealogized in the book of the genealogy of Adam. But afterwards there was one born like him, and his name was called Sheth. So there you have it. Now we're going to pick this up with the story of Samael and bring this, this lesson to fullness. I just want to again give a shout out to everybody in the chat room and thank all the new listeners for coming and for listening and for supporting the show. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for sending the questions that you have been sending and for being patient with me and giving me a chance to answer them. It just takes me a little bit of time. Also, just to give you an update, I should be sending in the final edit of what would be the last completed edition of Sons of God, who we are, why we're here, what all this is about. And once that book goes to print, it should definitely be here and available for your viewing pleasure by November of this year, which is, God willing, the plan, and at least that's what I'm hoping. So, I just ask that the Lord bless all of you in your own discernment. Again, people, don't listen or believe anything that I or anybody else says. Go forth in your own walk, in your own relationship with the Father and the Son, and take it to them, before them, in your prayer closet. Humble yourself before them and ask them to confirm these things for you. I know that a lot of what I teach is considered lunatic fringe, and it's things that are not embraced by mainstream churchianity. I'm in full realization of that. But, again, I've told you before, I'm no pastor, I'm no preacher, I'm no church authority, I never went to any seminary, I didn't even go to Sunday school. This was the discernment that the Lord led me to, and so I'm just going to share the truth as I see it with you. And God willing, this will, you will be a confirming witness to the things that I've come to knowledge on. In Yahushua Yahweh's name I pray. God bless all.